from a board perspective, is investment or the cost of operating an e-commerce business something that the board gets very involved in? Is it viewed as the cost of doing business? If you could touch upon some of the criteria that you think about.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it goes without saying when you're talking about businesses of the type I've described, revenues, anywhere up to $500 million, which are the ones I'm most familiar with, this is clearly a consideration for the board. You're operating in an environment of limited and finite resources, both human and economic, so you have to put a lens on these types of investments. I would say the board certainly looks at them, and in particular pays close attention to the investment and the payback period for an initial foray into e-commerce. If you're starting from ground zero and haven't gotten anything going in e-commerce, there is a healthy discussion around the table about what's the best way to get in. And we generally look at it through three lenses. Do you buy, which for the case of example would be buy using an Amazon marketplace and pay the fees and all that that's attendant there too? Do you build your own platform, or do you partner with .coms, brick and mortar .coms, retailer .coms, as I've previously mentioned? Usually you wind up with a combination of all three and try and optimize the return, taking all the things Christina mentioned into that equation. And I would just say that initial investment gets a lot of consideration by the board. There's an understanding, certainly when you're standing up an e-commerce platform or a combination platform initially, there's going to be a longer payback period, generally looking for 2 to 3 years. In incremental investments, whether you're adding another channel or adding another outlet, trying to attract a new audience, off of a base investment you've already made, generally gets less board attention. That is more the purview of management. Once you've kind of gotten some experience on your belt and you know that the management team is capable in the area of e-commerce. But also B, you'd expect the return on that investment to be, or the payback period on that investment to be a lot quicker. So generally we're looking for payback on an incremental e-commerce investment of less than a year. So those are the general types of conversations around the investment profile in e-commerce and the components we look at that take place around the board table.
Terrific, thank you. And then just to go back to Christina for a second, within your organization, Christina, who are the key stakeholders who are engaged in e-commerce? Is it everybody? Is it specifically focused to a smaller number of areas?
No, it's everybody. I was thinking back, gosh, maybe 10 years ago, and I was meeting with somebody at Google, and they said, "Oh, a head of digital. That's like having a title that's head of electricity." I was like, well, don't tell anybody else that, because I'd like to keep my title. But it really, digital is really, particularly in the organization I work for today, but in all of the companies that I've worked for, digital really touches every aspect of the business, certainly touches every customer. Name a customer you have that doesn't engage with you digitally at some point. And digital is reliant on all the different aspects of the business as well, and will impact and require change and transformation from just about every part of the organization. And so it's hard to think of somebody who's not a stakeholder for digital. So my answer there would be everybody. And I view it as part of my role to demystify digital, to educate around digital, and to ensure that digital is infused and top of mind for all of my peers and all of the various stakeholders in the company. So I would answer that with everyone.
You'd probably want, you use the right word, because many of our clients are replatforming from either like their own custom built solution or some third-party competitive solution, and many of them are doing digital for the first time, which is, the good news is it's easier to convince people that they should be investing in e-commerce today than it was 24 months ago. No one is like, e-commerce, what's that? Or that's a fad. I'd say more often than not, the buyer for a solution like ours, our value proposition, like there's no conversation I like more than a new chief digital officer at a large organization that is looking to, transform its business. I had a call just last week with a new chief digital officer at an $800 million metallurgical materials company. They don't sell anything online. It takes them 2 weeks. They use POs, they fax orders. It takes them 2 weeks to let the client know when they're going to be getting their order. I mean, talk about low-hanging fruit, right? So, I can help this person get a site live in 60 days and then scale that business, and they get those quick wins. So it's typically the person that's buying BigCommerce. IT can be involved, but it's typically a CDO, it's a VP of e-commerce, it's somebody in the marketing team, somebody who's focused on the combination of infrastructure, but more importantly, user experience and usability and outcomes. I mean, that's that kind of our value proposition, which is don't worry about hosting and maintenance and load balancing and redundancy. Let us do all of that. And you think about merchandising and marketing and promotions and overall user experience. So it tends to be more of the business buyer than the IT buyer, but typically, for large organizations especially, there's still, an SVP of IT or a CTO who oftentimes is involved in that decision.